Welcome to the DigyKeys podcast. I'm Ethan Carter, here with Madison Brooks, to share tips for improving focus and concentration. Don't forget to like this podcast and subscribe to our channel. It helps us a lot and keeps you updated on new episodes. You know, we all want to sharpen our focus.
Oh, yeah.
And make the most of our time, right? Well,
sure.
Today's deep dive is tailored specifically for you. We're going to explore this awesome DigyKeys article that tackles the myth of multitasking and its effects on our concentration.
That's a great place to start because so many of us, I know I feel this way, feel like we just have to multitask to get everything done.
Right.
But this article really challenges that assumption.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
One of the first things that jumped out at me was how it debunks this idea of true multitasking. We've all felt that sense of juggling a million things at once.
Right.
But is our brain actually wired for that?
Yeah, that's the myth, isn't it?
Yeah.
The article points out that what we often call multitasking is actually rapid task switching. And you know that constant shifting between tasks, even if it feels seamless, comes with some serious hidden costs.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Right.
What are these hidden costs you're talking about?
Well, for starters, imagine your brain as a high-performance machine.
Okay.
Every time you switch tasks, it's like having to reboot the entire system.
Oh, wow.
You're essentially forcing your brain to slam on the brakes and then reorient itself to a completely new set of demands.
Right.
And all that reorienting takes time and energy, which drains your overall productivity.
So it's not just about the few seconds it takes to glance at a notification, it's the mental energy drain that follows, right?
Exactly. And those tiny drains add up over time. In fact, the article cites studies that show multitasking can slash your productivity by a whopping 40%.
Wow.
That's almost half of your potential output just gone.
40%, that's a staggering number.
It is.
Can you give us an example of how this might play out in real life?
Sure, think about something as simple as trying to write an important email while also keeping an eye on social media. Each time a notification pops up or you glance at your feed, you're pulling your brain away from the task at hand.
Right.
And while it might seem like you're only losing a few seconds, those micro-interruptions add up to a significant slowdown in your thinking process.
It's almost like driving a car while constantly shifting gears.
Yeah.
You might inch forward, but you're definitely not going to win any races.
That's a great analogy. And just like bad driving can lead to accidents, multitasking can make you far more prone to errors.
Oh, no.
The article actually points out that multitasking can increase your error rate by 50%, especially when you're dealing with complex tasks that require your full attention.
So not only are we slower, but we're also more likely to mess things up.
Yeah.
It's ironic because often we think we're being more efficient by multitasking, but we're actually sabotaging ourselves.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is that the article completely debunks this idea of the natural multitasker. You know, those people who seem to be able to juggle a million things at once without breaking a sweat?
Oh yeah, I've always been a little envious of those folks.
Well, it turns out that even they are subject to the same cognitive limitations.
Okay.
No one is immune to the hidden costs of task switching.
Interesting.
The article really emphasizes that focus, not multitasking, is the true key to effectiveness.
That makes me feel a bit better about my own multitasking struggles. Now, the article doesn't just stop at productivity, right? It also dives into the cognitive impacts of multitasking. And this is where it gets really interesting for me.
Absolutely. This is where the article truly digs deep into the science behind how multitasking affects our brains.
Right.
One of the key points it highlights is the strain that multitasking puts on our working memory.
Can you break that down for us a bit? What exactly is working memory and why is it so important for focus?
Think of working memory as your brain's mental whiteboard.
Okay.
It's that short-term storage space where you hold information while you're actively processing it. You use it for everything from remembering a phone number to following instructions to making decisions. And when we multitask, we overload this system, essentially cramming too much information onto that mental whiteboard.
I see.
And what happens when you have too much on your whiteboard?
Things get messy and you start to lose track of information. I can definitely see how that would impact focus.
Exactly. You might find yourself forgetting details, rereading things multiple times, or struggling to follow conversations because your working memory is simply overloaded.
Makes sense.
And this is especially true for those complex tasks that require you to hold a lot of information in your mind at once.
You know, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed that when I'm trying to do too many things at once, I become much more forgetful. And it's harder to retain information Like my brain is trying to juggle too many balls in the air, and some of them inevitably end up dropping.
That's a great way to put it. And remember those task switching costs we discussed earlier?
The time it takes for our brains to switch gears between tasks.
Right. Well, those costs don't just involve time, they also involve a loss of cognitive resources.
Okay.
Each time you switch, you're depleting that limited pool of mental energy that you need for focus and clarity.
Right.
The article gives some specific time ranges for these costs, and it's pretty shocking.
Really?
It can take anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes for your brain to fully readjust to a new task.
So we're talking about a significant cognitive delay every time we switch gears.
Precisely. And if you think about how many times we switch tasks in an hour,
Oh, yeah.
let alone a day,
Right.
it's no wonder we end up feeling mentally exhausted and struggle to concentrate.
For sure.
It's like running a marathon in short bursts with constant stops and starts.
Yeah.
You're never going to reach your full potential that way.
This is truly eye-opening. It makes you realize how much we underestimate the impact of these constant mental interruptions.
It is.
And what's even more alarming is that the article goes on to explain how all this task switching can actually change our brains over time.
That's right. This isn't just about feeling scattered in the moment.
All right.
The article raises concerns about how chronic multitasking can actually rewire our brains, making it harder to focus in the long run.
Okay.
We're essentially training our brains to crave distraction and stimulation, shortening our attention spans and making it more difficult to engage in deep, focused thinking.
That's a bit scary. We'll delve deeper into those long-term impacts and what we can do about them in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We've been unpacking some pretty thought-provoking stuff of multitasking and its effects on our brains. Before the break, we left off on this idea that chronic multitasking can actually rewire our brains,
Yeah.
making it harder to focus over time.
Yeah. It's concerning. We often think about the immediate impact of multitasking, like, oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm making more errors, but the long-term consequences can be even more significant.
Yeah.
The article delves into how constant task switching can weaken the prefrontal cortex, which is essentially the control center of our brains.
Okay, I need a little brain anatomy refresher here.
Okay.
What exactly does the prefrontal cortex do, and why is it so important for focus?
So think of the prefrontal cortex as your brain's CEO.
Okay.
It's responsible for all those higher-level cognitive functions that set us apart as humans.
Right.
Decision-making, planning, attention control, impulse regulation.
Wow.
It's all happening in that frontal lobe region.
Okay.
And when we constantly bombard this area with demands for multiple tasks, it can get fatigued and less efficient.
So it's like overwhelming the CEO with too many tasks, leading to poor decision-making and difficulty focusing.
That's a great way to visualize it. And unfortunately, the prefrontal cortex isn't the only area that takes a hit.
Oh, no.
The article also points to research suggesting that chronic multitasking can damage our memory, both in the short term and the long term.
Wait, so we're not just talking about becoming more forgetful in the moment. We're talking about potential long-term memory problems as well.
That's the concern. You see, when we're constantly bombarding our brains with information and distractions,
Right.
it becomes harder for our brains to encode and store memories effectively.
Okay.
The article explains that multitasking can interfere with the process of consolidating memories, moving them from short-term storage to long-term storage.
Yeah.
And if we're not consolidating memories properly,
Yeah.
we're more likely to forget things over time.
This is getting a little scary.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that multitasking can also increase stress levels.
Right?
How does that tie into this whole picture?
That's another crucial point.
Okay.
All this switching and juggling isn't just mentally taxing, it's also physiologically stressful.
Right.
Each time we switch tasks, our bodies release cortisol, the stress hormone.
Oh, wow.
And while a little cortisol can be beneficial, chronic exposure to elevated cortisol levels can have a detrimental impact on our health, contributing to burnout, anxiety, even depression.
So it's a vicious cycle.
It is.
We multitask because we feel overwhelmed, but the multitasking itself contributes to that feeling of overwhelm and stress.
Exactly. And to add insult to injury, the article also suggests that chronic multitasking can stifle our creativity.
Really?
When we're constantly bouncing between tasks, we're not giving our brains the time and space they need for those deep, focused thought processes that lead to creative breakthroughs.
So it's not just about productivity and focus. It's also about our mental and emotional well-being. and even our capacity for creative thinking.
Yeah.
This is quite a sobering realization.
It is.
But I'm hoping the article also offers some solutions.
Yes.
Because honestly, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information.
Don't worry, you're not alone. And yes, the article does provide some fantastic strategies for breaking free from this multitasking trap and reclaiming our focus.
Okay, good.
And that's what we'll dive into next.
Okay, because I'm definitely ready for some actionable advice. What are some of the key things we can do to sharpen our focus and ditch the multitasking madness?
Well, one of the most foundational strategies the article emphasizes is creating a distraction-free workspace.
Okay.
It might seem obvious, but in today's hyper-connected world, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
But how do we actually create that distraction-free zone, especially when so much of our work is done online?
The article suggests a few simple but powerful tactics.
See?
First, silence those notifications.
Right.
Turn off those pesky pop-ups on your phone and computer.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much mental energy we waste just glancing at those little red badges.
And that's so true. It's like a mini dopamine hit each time we see a notification.
It is.
Which just keeps us hooked on that cycle of distraction.
Exactly. And it's not just about external distractions, but also about managing those internal distractions, those mental tangents that can pull us away from our work.
Yeah.
That's where the article suggests incorporating mindfulness practices into your routine.
Okay, let's talk about mindfulness.
Okay.
What exactly does that mean, and how can it help us focus?
Mindfulness is all about training your attention to stay present in the moment without judgment. It's about noticing those distracting thoughts and urges without getting swept away by them.
Right.
And the article highlights that even a few minutes of daily mindfulness practice can make a significant difference in your ability to focus.
So it's not about emptying your mind, it's about learning to observe those thoughts and gently redirect your attention back to the task at hand.
Precisely.
Oh.
And the article mentions various mindfulness techniques like meditation, deep breathing exercises,
Right.
or even just taking a mindful walk in nature.
Okay.
The key is to find what works best for you and incorporate it into your daily routine.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about building that mental muscle to resist distractions and stay present.
Right.
But let's be realistic. Sometimes, even with a distraction-free workspace and mindfulness practices, we still have to deal with multiple tasks. What does the article suggest for managing those situations?
The article acknowledges that completely eliminating multitasking might not be realistic in today's world,
Yeah.
but it emphasizes the importance of being intentional about when and how you multitask.
Okay.
The key is to recognize the difference between tasks that truly require multitasking
Right.
and those that are better suited to single tasking.
Can you give us an example?
Sure.
Okay.
Listening to a podcast while folding laundry might be perfectly fine.
Right.
Neither task requires your full attention,
Right.
and they don't interfere with each other.
Makes sense.
But trying to write a complex report while simultaneously responding to emails is a recipe for disaster.
Oh, for sure.
Those tasks both demand significant cognitive resources,
Yeah.
and you'll end up doing neither one well.
So it's about being mindful of the cognitive demands of each task and choosing your multitasking moments wisely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even when you do need to multitask, the article suggests grouping similar tasks together to minimize those task switching costs. For example, instead of checking emails sporadically throughout the day, try batching your email responses into 1 or 2 dedicated sessions.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It allows our brains to stay in a similar mode of thinking, which can reduce mental fatigue and improve our efficiency.
Right.
And above all, the article reminds us that the key to managing multitasking is to be intentional.
It is.
It's about recognizing when multitasking is truly necessary versus when it's just a habit or a way to avoid focusing on the more challenging tasks.
Exactly.
So it's about taking control of our attention and directing it where it's needed most.
It is.
And this deep dive has given us some great tools to do just that.
It has.
We've explored the science behind multitasking, the hidden costs it imposes, and most importantly, some practical strategies for reclaiming our focus.
We have.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some additional resources that can help you implement these strategies and take your focus to the next level.
Okay, sounds like.
Welcome back. I'm really excited to continue our deep dive into focus. We've already uncovered so much about how multitasking impacts our brains and learned some really effective strategies for improving our concentration. Now, as promised, we'll explore some resources that can help you take your focus to the next level and put all these great tips into practice.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes having that extra support and guidance can make all the difference, especially when you're trying to build new habits.
That's so true. It can be overwhelming to know where to start. So what are some specific resources you'd recommend?
Well, one resource that I always point people to is the DigyKeys book, Ability to Focus. It really expands on everything we've been discussing today and dives deep into the science behind focus, offering a ton of practical tips and techniques that you can start using right away.
I've heard great things about that book. It's specifically designed to help people boost their concentration.
It is. It covers a wide range of strategies, from creating that distraction-free workspace we talked about earlier to techniques for managing your time more effectively, and even incorporating mindfulness practices into your daily routine. It's really a comprehensive guide to enhancing your focus.
That's awesome. So for our listeners who are eager to dive deeper and really implement these strategies, Ability to Focus sounds like a fantastic resource. Where can they find it?
You can find it right on the DigyKeys website, along with a ton of other great resources on personal growth and productivity. Just head over to DigyKeys.com and you'll find a whole section dedicated to focus and concentration.
Perfect. Now, beyond the DigyKeys resources, are there any other books, websites, or apps you'd recommend for our listeners?
Absolutely. There are so many great resources out there. If you're looking for more books, I highly recommend Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a fantastic exploration of the importance of focused work in today's distracted world and offers practical strategies for cultivating that deep work habit.
Deep Work is definitely a classic in the productivity space. And what about websites or online resources? Are there any that you find particularly helpful?
Yes. Websites like Mind Tools and Psychology Today have a wealth of articles and tips on focus, concentration, and productivity. They cover everything from time management techniques to mindfulness practices to strategies for dealing with procrastination. You can really get lost in all the great information they have to offer.
Those are great suggestions. And of course, we can't forget about the power of technology. There are so many apps out there designed to help us focus and stay on track. Do you have any favorites?
Oh, definitely. For minimizing distractions, I love Freedom and Rescue Time. They allow you to block distracting websites and apps for specific periods so you can create that focused work environment. And for managing tasks and projects, Trello and Asana are fantastic tools. They help you stay organized, prioritize your work, and collaborate with others effectively.
So there's really a tool for everyone, no matter what your specific needs and preferences are.
Exactly. The key is to find what works best for you and integrate those tools and resources into your daily workflow.
And as we wrap up our deep dive, I just want to emphasize that improving focus is a journey, not a destination. It's about experimenting with different strategies, finding what resonates with you, and being patient with yourself along the way.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, even small changes can make a big difference. Start with 1 or 2 strategies that resonate with you and gradually build from there. The most important thing is to take action and start cultivating those focus habits that will serve you well in all areas of your life.
This deep dive has been truly enlightening, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to take control of their focus and create a more productive and fulfilling life.
Me too. It's been a pleasure diving into this topic with you, and I encourage everyone listening to continue exploring these resources and discovering what works best for them.
Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe for more. Visit DigyKeys.com for personal growth resources, including our book, Ability to Focus, to boost your concentration. See you next time.